All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to ID and Me, ORCID and Accessibility. I'm Kimberly Iniger, Senior Events and Outreach Manager here at ORCID. Now, before we get started today, I would like to bring your attention to some features available during the webinar to enhance your experience. The first is closed captioning and translated captions. These features allow you to enable audio captions and translate those captions into a few different languages. To enable, click on the Show Captions button in your Zoom toolbar. We also have a dedicated Q&A channel, and we invite you to submit your questions throughout the session. You can even submit them anonymously if you prefer. To do so, click on the Q&A button in the Zoom toolbar. You can also view questions other attendees have submitted, upvote questions you're interested in, and add comments. We do have some helpful documentation available to assist you in accessing these features, which is available in the resources in the Zoom toolbar. Finally, the session is being recorded, and the recording, along with session materials, will be shared after the session. Now, I'm delighted to introduce ORCID Senior UX Designer, Dan Denis. Dan, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Kimberly. Hello, everyone. As Kimberly has just mentioned, I'm Dan, and I'm a Senior UX Designer here at ORCID. Thank you for joining me today, especially as it's Global Accessibility Awareness Day. Yeah, I'm hoping that we can you can follow along with ORCID's journey towards accessibility over the last few years. Obviously, every journey starts with a first step. And it's got to start somewhere. And this one basically started when I joined ORCID back in April 2020. I'd seen and experienced in previous roles what happens when organizations are just, they cannot or will not embrace accessibility and inclusivity in their product. And I was pretty keen to join and work for an organization that really was as passionate as I am about the subject and wanted to do something about it. So when started off at ORCID, I knew I wasn't going to be starting with a totally blank slate. There'd been lots of thinking in the organization around accessibility. There's some plans had been made, that bit testing had been done, actually with people who were experiencing accessibility and usability problems with using the registry. And we had actually, the QA team had done some tracking of broad mechanical accessibility stats. Best of all, really, in the background, there was a palpable and concrete sense that everyone at ORCID was really genuinely keen to do something about accessibility, to get in there and get going. We were just not really sure, any of us, how or where to start. And on one of the first pieces of work that I started up at ORCID was a revamp of the ORCID registry itself, our main application, our main tool, which contains the ORCID records. And this was termed as the registry speeder and was primarily about introducing a new back-end infrastructure, but also, when I came on board, involved revamping the look, the feel, the behavior, the functionality of this whole application. And this suddenly proved an opportunity, a golden opportunity, to build in accessibility thinking right from the start. We were already pulling it apart and rebuilding it, and so this was our chance to actually really get things going and do it from the ground up. And really, what we were looking at is understanding that up till this point, we'd been fixing problems after they happened. If we found them, if anyone had found them, if they would QA had pulled them up, or we were getting support requests, and the thing was shifting left, this fundamental methodology, preventing problems from occurring. And this was our chance to do it. Get in there and make it accessible, work on it and get it to be right before it was out in the wild. And I suppose it's a difficult one to ask about why we should care about accessibility, why organizations should care about accessibility. Um, it's making things accessible is really, really, really hard work. It's incredibly difficult. And we could see this opportunity with the registry speed up and combining all of this potentially additional work. But it wasn't immediately clear how we could sell this extra effort, this extra time, this need for additional resource and more thinking. How we fit all that? Why should we be thinking of fitting all of that into our normal design and development cycles, which are already full of exciting things and new features? And how could we actually manage to prioritize all of that work, which could possibly be seen as only adding value to a small subsection of a massive audience? Traditional ways of thinking, we've got a small percentage, maybe 1%, 2% of our users are struggling with accessibility issues. And it's pretty obvious, actually, why we should care about accessibility. There's a legal obligation that we have here. So we're a global organization, and that means we straddle a huge number of different regulations and laws around the globe. Sometimes they feel like they are competing, structured very differently, but we need to be well aware of those and kind of work towards meeting those obligations that we have legally. There is the very basic moral and ethical obligations that we have to our users. It's a very human thing. We should be working to, it's the right thing to do. We should be working towards making ORCID accessible to everyone, regardless of their ability, their status, their location, the kit that they use, the way that they access ORCID. It's one of our core values as well, is inclusivity. And if we fail our users, if someone can't use it. And finally, this is pretty much enshrined in one of our organizational principles, increasing global participation. And that's global participation is far more than just geography. It's not about necessarily where you are. This is about participation in all manner. So yeah, everyone should be there, and we've put these principles are front and center, and we need to stick to them. Thinking about accessibility and how we can implement and work with it within ORCID, there are essentially considered to be three broad pillars, underpinning pillars of accessibility. The first is the easiest to kind of measure and to get a grip on. It's compliance, meeting a set of defined standards like WCAG, the W3 standard, the basic standards. These are a set of checklists, a set of points, a set of criteria that you meet, and when they are done, you say, yes, we meet those criteria, we are accessible. Second is culture, and culture is important because everyone out beyond the product, the design, the dev teams, everyone in an organization needs to think it accessibly, and there's a lot of work involved in influencing and convincing people of the value of accessible thinking and accessible action. And so that is it's another fundamental pillar. And finally, the education. So, gathering those skills and knowledge and continually learning. And this is an organization-wide thing. Again, how do you encourage people to continually grow their knowledge of accessibility best practice and say regulations and laws around the globe and how we deal with them? Yeah, it's a complicated thing. And what we encounter is that quite often organizations focus on compliance directly because it is the easiest and most measurable thing, and it's visible. You can mark down, and you can mark a checklist off. You can put a load of points down, and you can say, well, we've done this. We've made it. The problem with this is that even though we check, or we can check every single box, we can meet every requirement, we can get every single criteria, we still might have a fundamentally inaccessible and unusable service. This is about looking deeper, needing to look deeper than just these box ticking things. And this leads us to accessibility theatre, the fact that empathizing and trying to be your users, our users, who are experiencing these barriers, are having issues, problems, difficulties, accessing the service or the tool or the app. We're not them, and we can't be them. We can play at it, and we can pretend, and we can meet those mechanical standards, but what we can't do is genuinely experience what they are going through and how they work these things, because we're not forced to. We can switch on, we can stop, we can open our eyes and stop listening to a screen reader. We can we can use a mouse to pick out the thing that we want instead of trying to navigate through it with a keyboard. And what it became clear was that although we work really, really hard at ORCID to have a thriving, diverse, representative, inclusive workplace, we don't actually have any workmates or colleagues that really rely on these kind of technologies and really rely on these technologies on a day-to-day basis. And what this led us to is that we needed to find an external organization that could help us do a proper audit, a real full accessibility audit of the ORCID registry. At this point, I'd just like to say that this is none of this. Accessibility theatre does not diminish anything that anyone else has been doing with accessibility. Any work to make your app, your tool, your service more accessible is good work. And the earlier and the sooner that you're actually doing something is great. And so just don't be disheartened. This is a thing to keep in mind and to always be thinking about. So we went off looking for an accessibility auditor, and once again, as flagged, we were doing this on the fly. Obviously we can apply some pretty standard kind of procurement methodology to this, and we can kind of go out looking. And what we did was set out our requirements, explore the options available, get those recommendations in from peers and people that we trusted, long list, short list, have detailed conversations, and then make a call. What we found was that there are a huge array of these organizations out there, and they range between kind of huge global consultancies like DQ, who you may well have heard of. These people are very well established. They offer products, automated tooling, huge teams of consultants, and they're very, very well recommended. And then there are tiny little kind of companies, one-person bands who kind of get lots and lots of work because of this very detailed, focused, passionate love for accessibility, and provide a very personal and very specific kind of tightly knit approach. And then there are hundreds of organizations that fall somewhere in between. we were looking for a smallish, proactive organization, had a track record and an incredible kind of portfolio of work, ideally with someone who'd been kind of the organizations in the academic sector or similar to ORCID, a real genuine belief in what they were doing, so that ethos that's putting inclusion and accessibility front and center. Would have rather liked it to be local to the product team in the UK, so we could actually visit. And really what we wanted were real people, real users who use that assistive technology every single day to navigate and make their way around the web. And we found an organization. We found a company called the Digital Accessibility Centre. They're in Wales, in the UK. And the thing that stood out for us about DAC is that every single one of their accessibility specialists were real people with real disabilities, issues, ranging from vision impairment to cognitive issues, learning difficulties, all of these things, and they used and they worked with the assistive technologies that we had no idea about every single day. That's how they navigated. That's how they worked with the web. That's how they got their work done. And they were genuinely an excellent fit for ORCID, and our mission and our approach and our ethos. And it's worth noting also that they go out of their way to hire specifically these skilled people, but with these wide range of disabilities and issues. And we really liked that approach. This is genuinely putting these skilled people right up front, and is not just about compliance. It's not just about meeting these checkboxes. And so in April 2022, we hired DAC to carry out our first accessibility audit. And it was immediately clear that the registry is a huge, large, complex beast, and we weren't really sure how on earth we could ever test everything in it in a decent span of time. Plus, also, how it would be feasible to make those routes, those journeys available to DAC to be able to complete in a kind of sensible time frame. So we decided to focus on 8 key journeys through the ORCID registry. Viewing and navigating a public record, which is pretty much, people come in, look for something, try and find something on an ORCID record, move about, open a few things, get some details, move on. Register a new account, add some personal info, so add a biography, add an employment affiliation, manually add a work, use search and link, navigate an established private record, so a record of go into My ORCID, log in, sign in, and basically navigate a record with a considerable number of items on it. So a lot of information, and sign in and sign out. So 8 key journeys. For the further scope and spec of this audit, sticking to desktop viewports primarily, that's 75% of our traffic. We do get smaller devices, of course, and that percentage is growing, but the vast majority of our users are on viewports larger than 840 pixels. It was a nice to have, but obviously DAC wanted to go and test on those and have a look, then they would. Domain-wise, we were focused entirely on the registry. So this means we're not looking, and the audit should not include subdomains of ORCID, such as the info site, info.orcid.org, the help center. These were out of scope. We knew we'd have to get to them sooner or later. And you know, that's something else that we need to think about, and it's still ongoing, but not now. And language wise, English, US, UK only at this point in time. Obviously, DAC were encouraged to move about and change the languages to see whether that did anything, caused any problems, but we were sticking to English in this time. And yes, we couldn't get them to test it in Welsh, which is their native language, because unfortunately we don't have a Welsh translation yet. With an accessibility audit, we need to obviously define the standards, the benchmarks, the thing that we are aiming to meet. And the de facto standards for accessibility are the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, from the W3C. And WCAG comes in 3 levels: A, AA, and AAA. These are increasing levels of complexity, but also specificity as well. So level A is pretty basic. We should be pretty far along with that if you are building in any kind of, and building and designing in any kind of, with any kind of consideration towards accessibility, then you should be pretty close to meeting those kind of things. AA, which is broadly considered the baseline for accessibility. And so, yeah, that's our target audience and our target level, sorry. And AAA is incredibly difficult to meet because it is very, very exacting. If you could meet AAA, then it would mean the site is or app is accessible to the widest possible number of users across the board. But it does involve some very, very detailed thinking and some quite stringent criteria. If we could meet any AA criteria, then we would. But there's an understanding that perhaps that might be beyond us, or that they need a lot more thinking. and this is a very personal thing here, but I looked at this and I genuinely was privately concerned that, given the depth of that we will be looking at these things, that maybe the ORCID registry might turn out to be fundamentally inaccessible. I've seen it happen in other organizations, and it was genuinely frightening to think about this, and to think that we might be setting off something which would just come back to us and just say, well, it's a disaster. You remake it, rebuild it, completely, you know, you can't, there's no salvaging this. and the deep breath, a little under 4 weeks it took, so a little under a month. And the DAC report came back, and there were 193 pages of it. And I, as you can imagine, my first response was panic, until we took a good look through. And it was, first off, clear that there was a huge amount of detail, and that there were that the issues were so thoroughly thought out and presented, that we had remediation advice, description, criteria and standards, code examples, all of these things, and that we didn't need to be quite so concerned about the volume. Perhaps this was genuinely doable. And across these 8 key journeys, we essentially had 67 accessibility issues in total, 32 level A, so they're basic, and obviously this is not, none of this suggests size of an issue. So in some things, an issue, it takes 10 seconds to fix, and then goes to code. In some situations, huge thing. Level A, 18. AAA, only 2, which is great. And then there's this little bit at the end, usability, which is where the auditors from DAC had experienced problems, issues, difficulties accessing a piece of functionality, but they didn't fall necessarily under a specific criteria of the accessibility standards. But they still flagged these, and they were important to fix because they caused them problem and stopped them from doing what they needed to do. Broadly, these kind of things, well, they were all pretty similar as you would expect. So general things, lots of issues with heading structure and heading order, focus and tab order is a sort of thing. So keyboard navigation and understanding where you are on a page, fields and that are unclear or unlabeled, and primarily kind of things like information not being conveyed to assistive technology. So we show things, but maybe we don't tell people. We don't make it clear what they're clicking on. They don't know if there's a list of delete buttons on a row of a table or something like that. What do each one of those delete buttons do? What are they connected to? And then you've got the classic kind of accessibility issues, color contrast, to my eternal shame, because I thought that I'd fixed all of these, but no, it still came back up again. And icon ambiguity are classic things that just don't look, they don't explain what they are, and we don't tell people, or we don't make it clear. The other thing that became really quite obvious very quickly is that because of the way that we built the registry, the right way, we had a DAC issue would focus on one component and list that component, and it would say, oh right, okay, you've got a problem here with this, and then it would go on to say, well, and that problem is obviously present wherever this component turns up in the registry, which could be one place or could be 100. And this meant that we really had to think about exactly how we would manage and think about each of those issues and work out how much impact each one would be having. And this resulted in what most people, I would imagine, would do, most teams would do. We needed a coherent plan of action to tackle all of this. And so we made a big old spreadsheet. It's huge and overcomplicated, but it allowed us to group and see the spread of all of the tasks underneath their different levels. And we decided that we were going to prioritize and all pretty much laser focus on the ORCID record, on every issue that was there in the ORCID record in the public and private reviews. What that meant is that for this one, out of scope, we were going to put aside and set aside the issues in sign-in, registration, the homepage, global header and footer, search, inbox notifications. It was hard. It was a hard choice to make, but to genuinely be able to have the impact that we wanted to have, we needed to scope this very tightly, and so we did the ORCID record. And so we took all these tasks, and we worked together, dev, QA, product, design. We got together and we worked through, and we made the cards. In some cases, these were purely technical work. Fix this. This bit of code's wrong. This got incorrect ARIA roles on it. It's tag it with accessibility. Get it into the backlog. Get it in there as quickly as possible, and try and get it done. In some cases, though, we hit some things which needed more design input, needed more thinking, UX, product design thinking from the off, and those cards would end up on the UX board, the user experience board, which meant that I would be looking at them first. And those cards tended to be the ones that would need more time and effort to complete, because they were really touching on the roots of everything within the registry. And so we realized that we needed to be talking more. We needed to be communicating the accessibility information between the design and the dev. And there were specific requirements that I was setting out that I needed to make sure we were meeting when it went into development, that we'd never been communicating before. So upfront discussion between design, dev, and QA teams suddenly became a thing far more prevalent, and it was and it still is an important and vital aspect of our everyday workflow, is talking to each other as soon as possible about these things. And one major change that I had is I use, but the rest of the team also uses Figma, which is essentially a collaborative UI and interface design tool. It's pretty much an industry standard. And those designs and from Figma, I make them. They're shared directly with Dev and QA via an embed in a Trello card. And we sometimes work together. We open them up, we go through them, we talk through them, leave comments, back and forth, as you would expect from standard handover. But before we got into all of this, my designs would contain style, color, typography, layout, all the things that you would expect from a file that was essentially saying, make it look like this. And now we had accessible behaviors, tab order, reflow guidance, assistive text, heading order, sectioning detail, structural changes, behavioral changes. And all of these needed to be communicated within those Figma files. Big change, more work, but vital to make sure that we were doing the right thing and that we would meet the criteria that we needed to. And so I just wanted to talk about three of the biggest things that we looked at during this lengthy period of work to fix these issues within the ORCID record. Quite a lot of those issues stem from the record, just simply the underlying structure, how it was made. We'd always built it to try and be logically structured, but that's very much from a visible, a looking at the record way of working. As soon as we tried to move through it in a way that was using the keyboard or via a screen reader, it exposed a lot of flaws, but oddities and strange behaviors where things weren't quite where you would expect it. If you were looking at it, you could see that they were related, but in this instance, you couldn't if you weren't using that expected bit of technology. So we went back to the drawing board, quite literally, and restructured the building blocks of an ORCID record to make it clear, to landmark every single section of information clearly and obviously, however you were navigating the record. The next massive bit of work there is revising and updating the form and modal structure. Pretty much every single app or service that asks for information, that requires information, is just a collection of forms, and we're no different. But the thing is, building good, accessible, logical, clear, easy to navigate forms is really difficult. You know, we've done a brilliant job up until this point, but there was more that we needed to do. It's very specifically about just making these things clear, making all this depth of information clear to someone who perhaps is not navigating visually, is not looking at it. And this was a massive undertaking. And then there was visibility and setting the visibility on items in your ORCID record, be it your names or your works, affiliations, whatever, is a core part of the record functionality. And yeah, it needed to. We knew it had some accessibility issues prior to the audit. They'd already been flagged, but this was an opportunity to completely go back and make things clearer and rectify some very kind of deeply ingrained work and functionality within the registry. And so we completely revamped the whole visibility widget and the process, and to make it proactively communicate information when it changes, when state changes, and make sure that you're informed about what the visibility of your item or items are, and that you know which one is associated with which, because those relationships are very difficult to communicate. So we were in sync. Design and dev team, we were doing great. But QA, those who have to pick up the slack at the end, essentially, once we think that we're done, they had to rethink the way that they worked, because they were suddenly looking for a whole new set of acceptance criteria. There were a whole new set of requirements they had to meet and see and compare. So we looked at accessibility tools, automated accessibility tools, to see whether we could help them get at least an idea of those mechanical issues, those compliance issues, and we found a tool called Axe DevTools Pro from DQ, who mentioned earlier, and it's a great tool. The QA team run the tool on feature. It reports back, listing issues that we may, well, hopefully it lists no issues, but it finds those issues, flags what's wrong, gives remediation advice, goes back into the QA mix, we get it fixed. But we then encountered one further issue, and this is fundamentally the problem that we have trying to pretend that we use these technologies to figure out the problems with them. There is a huge learning curve involved with screen readers, and screen readers, in simple terms, just read out. They read what they are pointed at. So pointed at a big block of copy, editorial copy, it'll read it. Pointed at an interactive object, and things get a little bit more complicated, because it needs to tell you what the state of that object is. It needs to tell you where there's a value already in it. It needs to tell you where there's a placeholder, where there's any format due for it, whether there's a problem with it, whether it's related and will change the information in a different field or form. And the other thing we also discovered was that the screen readers, the most common screen readers, VoiceOver on Mac and NVDA and JAWS on Windows, they all read things out in slightly different ways. So the things are in different orders. It's usually the same information, but it's just presented, read out in a different way, which meant that the QA team literally have to test individually different things, different times, with these different programs, and see what happens, and then compare the results. It's hard work, and they are doing an amazing job, given that there are no shortcuts here. It's testing, and it's complex, but we are getting better at it, and the more familiar we get with this, the faster we can do it. We also did some work that was outside of the registry as well. So this is kind of working on our 3 pillars. This is working on the culture, accessible culture, across ORCID. So worked with the comms team directly to extend our brand palette, and also to create a whole array of accessible contrast accessible color combinations, and then give some guidance to the wider team on making accessible documents, presentations, assets, which colors work with which, what color combos do we know will work. So yeah, so there was stuff going on as well outside of just the registry. So we get to 2023. So we've been working on this from the middle of 2022, all the way up. And so we took a look at where we were. And after all that initial push to get all the prioritized work done, we had been going hell for leather on it. And we genuinely felt confident that the registry was far more accessible than it had been 12 months prior. And the numbers, so the numbers on our spreadsheet, there's a lot of green. We've been ticking things off. We've been marking them down. We weren't getting those issues being flagged up as we finished them when the QA team ran acts over them. But we just weren't sure. We weren't 100% sure. We couldn't be 100% sure. So we went back to DAC and we re-audited. The scope of things were the same. So we're not changing anything. They're still looking at the same 8 journeys. One thing that we did note, and that has had an impact, and we thought would have an impact, is that we put in a number of third-party tools. Help Hero, which is an in-product messaging system, so that we can talk and flag things up within the product itself, within the registry. OneTrust, which is our cookie consent solution, which I'm sure you will have encountered previously when you went back to the registry. These things weren't present when the original audit took place, and so there was a chance that they were going to cause problems. We use these third-party plug and play solutions because they are easy to implement, they're quick, simple, and quite a lot of the time they can be managed outside of the dev team. They can be configured by others, people in the product team, whatever. And obviously when we're procuring them, we do try and take into consideration how accessible they're going to be. But because of the way that they are abstracted from our code base and they interact with it in some ways and don't in others, we don't necessarily have that level of access to fix those problems that are in there, which is difficult. It leaves us in a difficult place. The other change that we made is that we decided to go for the latest, newest version of the WCAG standards, and this is 2.2. And 2.2 was formally released on 6th of October 2023, but was in candidate release for a long time. Although we were technically supporting 2 versions, they do sit side by side, and 2.1 issues do broadly, the vast majority of them translate directly into 2.2. There are some differences. Some criteria have been loosened, some have been made more stringent. Why we went for it is mainly future-proofing, really. Although we were always aware that we would have to wrap up 2.1 issues first. Quite a lot of the 2.2 issues covered other things. And so they would still be, by solving the 2.1 issues, would probably be solving the 2.2. Again, looks like a lot of issues. And it is, but it also isn't, because when we looked through the second audit report, there were almost no issues with the ORCID record. The work that we had done on the ORCID record, those restructuring, the remaking, the rebuilding of all of those, all of the record pages, was a quantifiable success. What we had now were pretty much duplicated issues quite often of all the things that we did not have in scope that we de-scoped for the first kind of audit. So registration, sign in, all of those big things, which were still problems in this instance, still there. So we prioritized again, and registration, sign in, a little bit more work on the ORCID record. There were some tiny little bits and pieces that were there, but we wanted to get them bang on. And those third-party add-ons. And we were looking, how complex would it be? Can a fix be rolled into existing work? Is it high impact, wide-reaching? Balance all those things out. And we're still working on it. So we're right where we are now. The registration and sign-in processes are much improved. We shipped those kind of early this year. We've been shipping some stuff around OAuth as well, which has really reduced a huge number of accessibility issues in those key journeys, those key bits of functionality. We're doing good work with third-party widgets, and we keep kind of trying to figure out better ways of incorporating them, interacting with them, and integrating them so that they are fully accessible and considered fully accessible. And then we've got all of those other accessibility tasks in the backlog, and we're going to link them to existing work, so they will be done as organically as possible, as part of other work if we can, unless they are flagship issues that we are aware of really need to be sorted. Left to do, there is a lot, as you saw. There's lots of numerically, there's a lot, but these things, the vast majority of them are connected, collated together. But some of the biggest issues that we still are yet to tackle. Visible focus styles. This is the thing where we highlight what object someone is interacting with. Seems simple, seems massively simple, but the registry uses some very, very complex, customized elements and components, and finding a consistent way of doing this has proved really tricky. We've tried default browser styles, we've tried material UI styling, we've tried custom styling. We're yet to find a really good way of doing this, but we will. Timeouts, yeah. Due to security, we bump people out of the registry if they're idle for a period of time. What we don't do is we don't tell them, which is quite stressful for some people, especially if you can't see that your record has changed. If you're not looking at it, you don't know. You suddenly go back to do something with it, and it's gone. You're somewhere different. You're out. So this is something that unfortunately needs some infrastructure work to actually sort out and to get set up. But we will sort that out. We will get that fixed. And the ORCID homepage, long due for an overhaul. We'll be working as closely with comms, who are now kind of in charge of that page, to make sure that it's as accessible as possible and meets our kind of high threshold for accessibility. So kind of, are we there yet? Have we made it? Well, the numbers, they still seem quite large, but it's important to bear in mind that this is covering both those audits. So this is the total number of issues across both of those audits that are still there. Some of those are to do with the priorities and the de-scoping that we had, and the change in WCAG spec has also left us with a few kind of duplicate issues potentially, and that's down to me. I need to kind of get into the nitty-gritty of that and pull some of those issues together, and I think we may well find that those numbers start to drop. Are we there yet? Yeah, I think we have done a brilliant job, but there is always still room for improvement. ORCID's journey is far more accessible. Made huge strides in removing these barriers, and we've shifted our focus away from mechanical coherence and compliance with standards to really thinking about how users interact with the registry. So yeah, proud of what we've done. Compliance wise, yeah, with designs, as we were talking about earlier on, you include all that accessibility guidance, development, they're building with accessibility in mind right from the very start. So everything that they build is built with accessibility in mind, and checking it with keyboard, dev tools across the way, screen readers, and the QA team, our accessibility checking is embedded into their workflows, and they're exploring the automated workflows as well, which will be amazing. Culture-wise, yeah, I've been shouting about this left, right, and centre, and where I can get involved and help and provide guidance or motivation or impetus to get these to get this kind of accessible thinking across everything, then that's what I've been doing, and occasionally I get to do some design work as well. There are a number of internal initiatives underway, and as we were talking about as well before, guidelines, presentations, social media imagery, organizational assets, presentations, all of these things. And the org, I think we do recognize that accessibility is more than just checklisting things now, and that's a big step forward. And there's lots of learning being done. Yeah, so technical aspects of building applications and services, embedding it across the organization, growing knowledge and enthusiasm for applying these accessible principles across all of our outputs, and really rallying behind that thinking. And our accessibility statement, so a living document that lists and states clearly what we've done, what we haven't done, where we're going, what we need to do. You should expect to see this document updated on a fairly regular basis. Yeah, and please do take a look at it, ask questions, send us queries about it, talk to us about it. So our journey really is not, it's not over. We don't finish. You don't finish accessibility. We can meet the criteria, and those criteria will then be expanded. They will change. We will introduce new functionality. Different problems will crop up. The different ways of interacting with the registry will appear, and we will continue to learn. We will continue to work on those three pillars into 2025 and beyond. And it will never stop. But I think we can at least say that our three pillars are pretty stable. Finally, I'd just like to say that if there is anyone out there who would like to talk more about this, if you're working with assistive technologies on a day-to-day basis, if you've got if you know anyone who would be willing to, who'd like to work and like to talk to us and maybe we could do some specific user testing, we'd love to hear from you. If you just want to chat about what we did, how we did it, and the kind of more technical sides of it as well, that would be grand. Finally, there's a few links and bits for reference. It's essentially that you can get a little bit more of an idea of where our thinking developed from, and you can also go and have a look at the Figma files directly. You should be able to access them and see the level of detail that's in there. And please do, again, if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask away. Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, Dan. Very insightful and informative presentation. And for everyone on the call, those links that Dan shared in the last slide, they will be available in the resources after the session. So you'll be able to check those out. We do have time for questions, so please feel free to submit any questions that you have to the Q&A or raise your hand and we can unmute you to hear what you have. I am going to drop a link here in the chat to the website that is all about Global Accessibility Awareness Day, which is today, as Dan mentioned, at the top of the session. So Today is Global Accessibility Awareness Day, and this cause is just to bring awareness to accessibility issues on the web. So there's a lot of good information there and kind of helped us develop our webinar for today. Dan, my first question for you is, if anyone on the call is thinking about their institution or their organization and how maybe this is something they should look deeper into, where should they get started?
Oh. Um, I think there's value in finding out where everyone is broadly around the organization, and seeing taking initially getting an understanding of what people feel about it, where they are collecting and collating those things that have been done. As I said right back at the start, one of the things that I was thrilled to discover is that quite often these things do go under the radar slightly. People are doing things, people do care and have started things, but maybe they didn't kind of make it anywhere for whatever reason. And so the sooner that you get an understanding of where people are and what has been done, then it becomes a lot easier to be able to kind of step back and go, okay, so yeah, we've thought about this, we have got something, we've done these things. What do we need to do initially? Where are we? You can baseline at least very broadly, and I did honestly find that very, very, very helpful, and was also thrilled to discover that it wasn't just these things can often be one person, like you say, someone driving this forward because for whatever reason they believe in it and believe that it's an important thing. So it's good to find those allies within the organization as well, and quite often you discover that there are a lot more there than you expected, and that once you're grouped together, your voice is potentially louder than than it might have been initially.
For sure. Well, thank you for that. We are running out of time for today's session, so I do want to thank everyone who joined us today to learn more about ORCID and our commitment to accessibility. This wonderful presentation that Dan has put together will be available in the materials along with the recording. And Dan, can you remind us of that email that folks can reach out to should they have any thoughts or questions when it relates to accessibility?
Yeah, it is quite simply accessibility@orcid.org.
Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
thank you, Dan. I'm going to drop a few more links in the chat to some upcoming sessions that we've got. Next week, we have a webinar session with the ORCID senior team talking all about research integrity and trust markers. So hope to see you all there. Thank you again, Dan, for this wonderful presentation. And thanks for everybody for joining us. We'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye bye.